Welcome back to Dive In. We're your hosts, Christian Denny.
Jessica Vandenberg.
And thanks for joining us today. As we dive into Kamala Harris is officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And I got to tell you, I was impressed. And I don't say that often much anymore. I was impressed with the convention. And you know, Jess, that I get a little hard and tough on our Democrats, our fellow Democrats. And I was impressed. I got to tell you, there's not much I would have changed.
This is not what I expected this morning.
I know, right?
Not at all. Wow, we haven't talked. It's Friday morning after the speeches, Friday, August 23rd. So, wow. Okay, Christian.
I know.
Take it away.
I know. I feel hopeful. And again, that was the point, right? This was the point of the convention, was to unite Dems, kind of showcase your largest assets, which I think they did a fantastic job. It was very unifying. It was very positive. And you know how I like that as a persuasion tactic, okay?
Yes.
Again, before we get too ahead of ourselves, anything can happen, and we know that. I mean, we still got 2 months or whatever it is, right? 3 months.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look,
the
digging's going to start, right?
Right.
The digging's going to start. So that's going to start. But I guess we could probably talk about the positive or the interesting, right? About the convention, about Kamala, about what happened. I find something interesting if we think back, and maybe I could be wrong on this, but she probably did a convention speech before, but it wasn't 2020. Right? It wasn't live in front of an audience, live in front of millions of people at home, in front of an audience. Maybe in 2016, she did one. But so to me, that's fascinating. That the biggest speech for Life 2020, as everybody recalls, the Democratic convention was virtual. Right?
Correct. Yes.
So it's different when you're in a room, right, with a camera, compared to in front of everyone. And I think she in some ways had to introduce herself, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so she's not the first woman to become a Democratic nominee for president. Okay, so we know that. Okay, Hillary was the first in 2016. But I watched her speech. You watched her speech last night. I got to tell you, I had high expectations. And we can talk about that a little bit, about my expectations. But, first I want to talk a little bit about how, with women, throughout the playbook, and it's all very different. And I'll give you an example. So when she was introduced, and I really loved all the speakers leading up to her. I just loved the whole format and flow of the convention. But
when did you start watching? Because you're on the East Coast time. I'm Central. Like, when did you start watching?
I always start watching around 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 Central, right? And obviously, she came on around 10:30 or thereabouts.
It was late. This convention, if I had one thing to change, it was too late.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they probably timed it that they're like, we're worried more about Central Time and Mountain Time than we are about East Coast Time, right? In terms of like their audience, because it was really late.
Yes, it was. And I was also concerned about that. Concern meaning I wanted to make sure that everybody, they got the largest audience they could possibly get. But here's what I think I know, or I've heard rumblings or seen on social media. I'm sure somebody's going to write it up in a big way. But, they actually gained viewers as the time went on.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's fantastic. So people were interested, obviously, because of the whole switch and change. It kind of created some interest.
Well, take a minute to think about what a Biden convention would look like.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yes. And we don't need to rehash that because it's kind of ancient history at this point. But, it would have been totally different. And you're right. She did, even though she's been vice president, of the United States. She's been a presidential candidate. People don't know her. And so I was concerned's not really the right word, but I was curious as to how she was going to, position herself last night.
How did you feel?
Well, you know me, I love when they pivot to the center. And I felt like...
What does that mean to you, pivoting to the center? Like
talking about issues that may not appeal to the far left, but that regular people in the middle or moderates or people who don't pay a great deal of attention to politics in their daily lives care about. So, for example, the border. And you and I have talked about this. I've always said, and when Biden was running for president, she is a part of the Biden administration. I was like, they need to talk more about the border because they do have a pretty good message on that. And that's where the Republicans are going to hit them and things like that. And I think that she did a good job in the sense of, we can do both. We can talk about, we can create this path to citizenship for people who are deserving or, who follow the law, and also secure our border because I do think people care about that. And I feel like that it's been a bit of a taboo subject for most Democrats. And of course, if we had, this is my opinion, if we had had a Democratic primary process, it may have been different, right? So anyway, but let's talk about when she walked out on stage. I don't know if you remember, but to this overwhelming applause. And there was a moment, and it's so super subtle, where I thought she felt a little overwhelmed. Now, it's a big moment, right?
Yeah.
It's a big, huge moment. And anybody human would also feel overwhelmed. But for women, I think you have to walk this fine line. You have to be humble and
strong.
Yes. So you have to be humble, but at the same time, act like you belong.
Oh, right.
And so I feel like that it was a little shaky as she got started, when she started talking about her bio. But I don't know if you noticed, but she really got more comfortable.
Well, I also think she let off talking about her mom.
Mm-hmm.
She probably was a little bit emotional.
Right. There's that too.
If you have a speech like that and you practice, but clearly, Maya spoke about it. There's always this theme with her mom and her campaign and who her mom was. She talked about her dad.
Yes.
You don't hear a lot about her dad, which I thought was interesting, good. But I don't really know what that means. But anyway, I think especially for other women, I say this to our clients or to people that I talk to who want to run for office, and I say, this is all about connection and values.
Right.
It could be about immigration. It can be about education. It can be about abortion. But really, there's a piece of it where if she doesn't add up all the policy that people are now going to ding her on, and when I say people, I say media. Really,
right?
Mostly, because I don't think any voters are sitting here waiting for her policy papers.
Right.
They're going to use that as a tactic, but it's more like, hey, how are you going to govern, and what's your value system on your governing? And so I can figure out kind of where I align with that outside of your specific policies on foreign policy or domestic policy, because as you campaign in poetry, govern in prose, right? Or yes. So you don't really know, when situations arise, exactly how you're going to react to it until it happens. And I think it gives her some time to, show who she is and why she came from where she came from. And it's very interesting. I'm gonna, it's fascinating. Her ability as well to do all of this in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely. And, again, I think the first debate is in a week or two.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Wow.
And so, there's going to be plenty of time to talk about policy and answer the tough questions or whatever it is. And I'm not one of those folks that, leans into that too much. Well, she hasn't answered the tough questions. She will. I'd rather her be prepared. And not to mention, she had to introduce herself, introduce her running mate, and then also unify the party. So that had to come first.
Yeah. Was there something, let's talk about the convention real quick and then let's talk about the women's stuff. Was there something that you really liked or disliked about the convention? Like I'll be honest, I also probably started watching it mostly after 9 when at East or Central Time, I have to put a kid to bed and
sure,
that takes a little time and sorting all that out and getting dinner prepared. We're still people, right? I enjoyed immensely everybody posting photos of, kind of like a family reunion on social media, seeing everybody together. And I think it must have been really special if you were there.
Oh, yes.
And then there's a moment that I say, because I've been, it's really fun, but it's a huge really ordeal, right?
It is.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's it's a production in every sense of the word for a week, and it's very choreographed and all that. And that applies to the Republican convention too. It's the same thing in terms of the production value. It's a big production, and it takes a lot of work and planning. The thing I liked the most about the convention was just the positiveness about it. And
I think, right. I think if it were Biden, it would be mostly about Trump.
Yes.
But it was like we had something to offer now.
Yes, 1,000%. And these again, we don't need to talk too much about Biden because it's ancient history at this point. But the old guys seem to want to do that. Let's just call it what it is. They seem to want to talk about the past. And, Trump's doing it now. I mean, Trump's basically trying to rerun 2016. And so I don't look, and I know in this Trump era.
Why do you think that is older men and the difference between, like, let's say older men and women about how they think about these things and how they position themselves? This is my opinion, but I just think women in general are more in tune to the future because they have, in my opinion, more stake in the future. Meaning, you usually have kids there's just, you have a little bit, you're just tuned into that a little bit more. When you are the primary whatever in your family or in your life,
Yeah, now I do think that in this particular case, this is more of a generational thing. And I think that why do the white guys do this with the older white guys? I just think they,
their time is
nostalgic,
past, and that's what they have.
Yes, and so
trying to make the case.
That's right.
I mean, I find that, and I'll just say this is an interesting topic, and maybe we should do a whole podcast on it and invite some fun guests, because I find that more often with younger men that we work with who are operatives also lead with their resume.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And women are kind of forced to do that because we get dismissed, and I think now that we're sort of middle-aged, we really don't feel the need to do that.
Right.
It's kind of tiring for us but I feel like now men are leading with their resume, or we get on conference calls and they have all the posters behind them, or whatever. And, that's probably an interesting dynamic of some sort of gender study that maybe someone
absolutely
can do at Columbia. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because, I think it's refreshing, and I felt like that feeling was palpable in the room. Of course, I was not there. But I actually think that really appeals to people, even though they can't necessarily articulate it. they feel hopeful. They feel, and as we know, politics is a great deal of politics is, people want to be on the winning team, and they want to be on the team that they feel has the momentum, and you know what I mean, is going places, and blah blah blah. So I do think there was a little bit of that, but I kind of expected that anyway, even though the convention itself kind of exceeded my expectations, and I am skeptical and have been skeptical about Kamala's ability to win. Not because she's Kamala. I mean, she's got a fantastic resume. I think if I had to style a candidate myself, it would be something like her.
For this moment. I think when we were having this conversation a year ago, if whether Joe Biden was gonna run again or not, we would have many conversations about many people, and there was a skepticism, right?
Yes.
I was more positive. I mean,
Yep.
I say that only because I met her,
Yep.
and it's different. I told you the story about my kid and whatever, but it's okay. I think you have a healthy level of skepticism on this, but
Yeah.
but also there was as soon as things changed, you changed your opinion right away.
I did. And I've been very...
And that's how people do, right?
That's
how
what
the real world works, right?
That is how the real world works. And it's people, most voters, and you tell me if you agree with me, most voters do not come into this process with some big ideology. Now, I do know that it feels like everybody's in a corner because of the way our information flows, and, communications are a little fractured right now. But most voters are not coming at this with some big ideology. They know what they feel. That's it. And so...
That's true. And so I want to rewind back, since we were talking about that a little bit. I take my daughter to school, take the dog on a quick walk, listen to a quick podcast, to come here, and we're doing this morning. And as I was listening, there was this report that some of the Biden staffers off the record had said that they feel like they did her wrong a little bit during the time. Yeah.
I did not. Okay.
So
well,
I think this is an interesting conversation, because I put it in the frame of being what you do to women, particularly women of color, in these situations. So I felt like that's a very interesting moment where they're trying to, backpedal a little bit on what they've done, and maybe course correct. I'm not sure that they have the same philosophy as you, where we're normal people and we switch. I think it was more of a territorial /
right. They don't want to miss the boat.
Yeah, but
right?
Now they don't.
Now they don't. Right.
I'm sure there's lists that people are holding, which I hope so in some ways. But that was an interesting moment. So just a different sort of category of people who have changed their tune.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not surprised. I haven't read it, but I'm not surprised at all. And I do, again, here's my opinion. I do think that there were members of the Biden team, define that as you will, who marginalized her. And I wasn't sure why. I was always I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I did. But I didn't know why. And so I was curious as to see how she would handle her campaign. She was, and by the way, she's been a fantastic partner to Joe Biden, a fantastic partner to him. And she's played the role of vice president very well. And I got to think at this point, it sometimes was not easy for her, because I do think she's marginalized either by him or by people around him.
And then all of a sudden she has a voice.
Yes.
That is separate.
And
doesn't have to do the walk the line.
Nope.
And really is just wow. I mean, it's just opened everything up, I think, to see the difference between somebody who can be marginalized, which often in society or in politics we do to women, and also kind of along the lines of what the vice presidency is, but you don't have to do that. It's really old school thinking about why they did that.
I agree. Well, I mean, and I think
it's you and I also think like there's this. I say this only in my ability to see it in the Black community that I've experienced, in my way of raising a Black daughter. Iron sharpens iron.
right.
There's this like, we're gonna take care of our kids, our folks, and we're a community. And the white community, and especially in politics, doesn't necessarily understand that, or they don't live it and they don't see it, because we don't support each other like that. And I see it all the time. So
Right.
I think there's this interesting issue of even in Democratic politics, I would say that, and I know the women, especially the women of color, have experienced it, where they are generally marginalized.
Yes.
And they have to do 1,000 times more
Yep.
to get to this place. And then looking back, and probably she will be held to a much higher standard than Biden ever would, or
yes.
any other people. But the fact is that she's going to be super successful, hopefully, and win. But because of the coalition, she's going to be able to put together people who
Right.
are on all different sides, who feel this feeling that we did not feel a month or two ago.
And at some point we need to talk about the map, and we will, because I think it's important. And I do think that the map is being a little redrawn right now, as opposed to 3 months ago when Biden was still at the top of the ticket. But we can talk about that later. And I do think that it has a lot to do with the fact that she's African American. But again, let's talk about that later. I want to get back to the speech, but I also want to put in this little aside. So, you know who showed up? This you'll love, Jess. You know who shows up at this convention? John Edwards.
No, I didn't see that.
Well, he didn't speak or anything.
No,
but
I know.
But he was there. And
Wow.
that's a blast from the past, right?
Christian worked
Yes, I
for
did.
a short period of time with John Edwards.
I did.
Yeah.
And John Edwards was my entree into Iowa, which we'll talk about later. But
How we met.
That's right.
John
How we.
Edwards.
And so, but John Edwards. Okay, so real quick, is in his 70s now,
Yeah.
and right, makes sense.
Yeah.
And a couple people that were at the convention sent me a note. They were like, John Edwards is hanging around. I think the Post wrote it up. And I said, and they were like, what's that about? I was like, he must want a job of some sort. And so I don't know. But
Do the white men ever retire? I mean, jeez.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, so
You
there
have to
was
be
that.
relevant all your life.
I know. I know. But why else would he be there? Anyway, so okay, back to the speech. Do you have a couple of favorite moments? Because I do, but I want to hear yours first.
No, look, I felt like I mentioned this before. I liked when she talked about her family.
Yeah.
I like I want to hear what you liked. 'Cause
So this won't surprise you. There's many moments I liked, and I already mentioned the border thing, but the line, have they lost their minds? And it was in
yeah.
and it was in reference to abortion rights, reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this so often. If anything, I mean, for me, the fact that we have a nominee now who can and is willing to talk about abortion, Joe Biden was unwilling to do it. Now, I'm sure the plan was always to have Kamala talk about abortion, but we know that
Well, maybe there was a reason for the plan, right?
Right.
Someone had to do it.
Somebody had to do it, and of course it made sense that she did, but we know that it doesn't have the same weight coming from the second chair, right? It has to come from the principal. And I love the way they framed it, which is not about abortion rights. It's more about stay out of my business, and that's something that people can, they can identify with. And it's a good message. And I love the fact that that's the tactic they're taking, because she went through all of it. She went through IVF, obviously abortion rights, but also abortion rights in the context of women's health, but also IVF, and also, birth control. So it was just really good. And then she was able to kind of pivot. She spent a ton of time talking about January 6th. I'm not crazy about, I know this is crazy coming from a Dem. I don't love to talk about January 6th, even though I feel the same way about it that everybody does. I don't love it because I think it's too politicized, if you know what I mean. And she didn't do it. She didn't do a lot of it. She did what she was supposed to do, and then she kind of moved on, which was good, because that becomes about, holding Trump accountable. And again, I'm all about holding Trump accountable, but the voters need to do that. And that's kind of where I am. So,
right. Probably, I think now, post-convention, 74 days, something like that, people will start voting.
Yes.
In Iowa, they vote 20 days before. We used to vote 40. So let's say, and 30 days, 40 days, people are going to start voting, which is election days at one time. Then there's like this period where, they're going to have to figure this out, right? They're going to have to go travel. The digging's going to happen, right? She's not this and she's not that and she's not this. But then I think when people start voting, I mean, at least I feel like when I was on the ground in North Carolina in 2008 or whatever,
yes.
and we started voting, it's a different level of enthusiasm when that starts happening.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So people are excited about it. You're going to see that happening with the early vote. Hopefully there's going to be huge numbers. Kennedy's getting out. It looks like he's endorsing Trump, which is like very interesting, because I think in a lot of states like Wisconsin, they were concerned about Kennedy taking from Biden at the time. I don't know what it looks like now. I also think that some of the people who were interested in Kennedy now can see the true colors, if that's fair, and believe kind of what folks were saying. I don't think there's an issue anymore of we're not going to vote because we don't know who we can vote for.
Right.
I think that is totally off the table. It's a whole different world now.
It is a whole different world.
Again, it probably could never happen any other way.
Exactly. That's right. I totally agree. And I do feel, the anecdotal stuff is just that. It's anecdotes. But as we know, it matters. We don't know how much. It's hard to know how much, but it does matter. So, and I hear about, we're doing workout in California. Now they have mail-in voting. And so people get their ballots at the beginning of October. So everything is moved up in terms of persuasion. And so, but the canvassers that I know about that are working, for Katie Porter and in Southern California, they are saying that it's when they're at the doors, all the enthusiasm's back.
Yeah, I mean that's what I hear as well, even here. And then I've talked to people in other states as well. Same response. I mean, there are people who are interested. It's like, where do you put this enthusiasm? How do you rein it in? How do you get people to talk to their friends? How do you, have these conversations? And I've had more conversations about it with just friends who are excited than people who in politics, which I think matters. A friend group from high school sending around about how their kids are getting registered now, whereas we didn't have that conversation 3 days ago or whatever it was. I went on a walk the other morning. I think I was talking to you, and my neighbor came up to me and said, I I feel enthusiastic or whatever. And I thought she was talking about my dog. And she was talking about Kamala, you know? So yeah, it's a very big deal. And we'll see how it lands, and hopefully we can get some folks on our podcast who have worked for her. We would like to talk more about her, but also about, you know, our experience as political operatives, how you do this work, how do you get into this work, encouraging like the next generation of folks to do this work, because there's never an ending stream of work, but also maybe we can get some younger folks on too to talk about why they'd want to do this and how they think about it differently. I don't know, that's an idea, but we're excited to be here, and thank you for listening.
Yes.
We feel like, I think a little bit where we didn't have, it's hard to have a voice in this process. And I remember I sometimes go on TV locally, and I hated it because it made me nervous, and, you know, my face would turn red and I didn't like myself on camera. But I knew that if I didn't do it, they would ask the white guy, which we love white guys, right?
We love white guys.
We love white guys.
We love white guys.
But we've heard their voices all the time. So anyway, and I'm glad that Christian is doing this, because she has not been able to talk openly about some of this stuff. We also aren't inhibited by having to be spokespeople for candidates anymore. So we like to talk about this and talk about our opinion, and maybe we can also get on some normal like voter types to see how they're feeling about it. It's not my maybe, you know, neighbors or something.
That's a great idea, because, you know, as you know, I worry is not probably the right word, but about being too in the bubble here in DC, because I'm in DC. So yeah. So, okay. So that we're going to wrap this up for today. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, we love questions, by the way, send them to the dive in pod. Don't forget the all one word at Gmail. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and YouTube for the updates, and we will see you next time.